Now, another poll, and I apologize for all of these statistics, but I hope it really helps you. They actually discovered that 64% of professional workers, so accountants and lawyers and people who in that professional class, they said that 64% that leaders making decisions without input was their biggest problem. So leaders just out there, I'm steering the ship, you know what I mean? I'm blindfolded and I've got my earmuffs on and I'm not listening to literally anything anybody else has said, but I'm in control. And they actually find that professional workers say that's the biggest problem. Now, why am I saying all this? Because if you do not listen to people, you will shut down their engagement. You will shut down their ideas and you will cause them to feel like you have created a toxic and repressive environment. And I'll tell you, the easiest thing you can do as a leader is listen to people. I mean, I actually think that as a leader, that's your job. Hey everybody, my name is Abe Brown, and I'm so grateful that you are taking some time to tune into this episode where actually over the next several episodes, I want to spend some time talking about creating healthy workplace culture. And there is almost nothing more important, I think, in some ways than healthy workplace culture. And why is that? Well, because of the fact that we spend about 50% of our waking hours on the job, working with people, either in person or remote. And so what that means is that the workplace has a major impact on our mental health, on our emotional health, frankly, even on our social health. And so we're going to be talking for the next several episodes about creating healthy workplace culture. But in order to do that, I want to begin by talking about the toxic workplace. And in order to do that, I want to start by sharing a bit of a story that I had a conversation a little while ago with an HR manager. And obviously, I'm giving you a fake name. Her name is Julie, because I don't want to give her identity away. But I remember her saying to me, and it was almost like, man, it really captured me because there was a lot of emotion, raw emotion when she said this to me. She said, Abe, I'm 100% sure that I can't keep on going like this. And even if I could go on, I wouldn't go on. And what she was talking about was what she had experienced and what she was experiencing in the workplace. And that was a toxic workplace culture. Now, you only have to be on the job for 5 seconds to figure out that workplace culture actually matters. Do you know that the research tells us that companies with a strong corporate culture see a 4 times increase in revenue growth compared to companies, this is according to Harvard, with a weak culture. So imagine you have a company with a weak culture. In other words, it's a toxic culture. It's a bunch of small people doing small things, hurting each other, operating out of spite, operating often out of hate. And that kind of company would have 4 times less increase in revenue than a company with a strong workplace culture. And when you think about that, you think, okay, boy, that's important. They actually discovered that 47% of organizations who have a successful company culture see significant increases in their revenue in the past year compared to just 9% of those who have a toxic culture. So it's not that a toxic culture can't survive. If you have a great business model, you can actually survive for a period of time with a toxic culture, but your actual revenue growth is going to be much, much less. And so I want to spend a couple of moments talking about what is a toxic workplace? Because it's one thing, to say, well, this is a toxic workplace or that's a toxic workplace, but I want to try to figure out and unpack with you here, what exactly is a toxic workplace? I think that a part of a toxic workplace, and this is really important, is a lack of trust. When you come into a work environment and you feel like you always have to, watch your back. You always feel like you have to look behind your shoulder because if somebody might be driving the knife in. I'll tell you what, that is absolutely a toxic workplace culture. Also, a toxic workplace culture is a place where you are driven so hard to the point of burnout and stress that you don't feel like you can even collect your thoughts and refresh your soul and keep going on for another day. And here's what's crazy. About 61% of workers right now say that they're burned out in their current job. 61%, that's a lot. And 31% report high levels of work stress. It's kind of funny. I was joking the other day, there's an engineering company that just moved in down down the hall from us, and I'm not going to tell you where we're located because I don't even know the name of the engineering company, but I see all of these dudes. I think they're all men. It's kind of weird. It's like 30 of them. And I see them in the washroom. I know this is getting a little awkward, but it's just a true story. And I'm older than most of these guys because they're all young guys, young engineers, and they're all working and they're all very hardworking. And I'm not being critical, but man, when you see them in the washroom, you kind of, both of us washing each other's hands, you look into each other's eyes in the mirror, and it's like, man, these guys, they're like soul dead. It's like they're working jobs that are sucking their soul. And I think to myself, man, these guys are way younger than me, but they have way less energy than me. They have way less vitality than me. And it's really not their fault. It's because they're going to a place every day where you can almost see the impact on the level of burnout and stress and frustration that they have. And it's sucking their soul. All these high pressure deadlines, all of these very complicated things that they have to do. And I'm not being critical, but what I think to myself is, man, we're designed for more. I'll tell you what, we're actually designed to do complex things, to do hard things, because I'm sure you do hard things too, but it's also about managing those in a way and being in a workplace that doesn't deplete you and drain you and exhaust you, but it actually empowers you. I'll tell you, part of a toxic workplace is also office politics. Now think about this. I mean, office politics are horrible. When you get into a workplace and you just want to go, you just want to do your job, you want to save the drama for your mama, and yet there's people who want to bring the drama from their mama to the workplace, and they want to impose their personal ambition, maybe their personal politics, maybe their political correctness, maybe whatever it is they've got going on everybody else in the workplace. And here I am, or you, just trying to do your job, just trying to survive till Friday, just trying to make it happen so that you can pay your bills and take care of the people that you love. And somebody else in the next cubicle is consumed with power and position and office politics. I'll tell you what, these things, lack of trust, an environment of burnout and stress, office politics, these things absolutely are the definition of a toxic workplace. But I don't know if that gets us far enough. And so I want to share with you 4 signs that you are in a toxic workplace. Now, I want to come at this with some empathy here today, because I know that a lot of people like myself who do workplace culture consulting, and we've worked with places all over the country and frankly, all over North America, from Fortune 500 corporations all the way to government, to small and medium-sized businesses, to solopreneurs. I'll tell you what, even solopreneurs have a workplace culture, to First Nations here in Canada. And I'll tell you what, I think a lot of people who teach on workplace culture are really hard on management. They're really hard on leaders. And I don't really want that to be my bent here today, because I'll tell you what, I did an MBA, one of the top business schools in Canada. There's not a single class on workplace culture. And so what ends up happening is you get lots of information on finance and accounting and how to do bookkeeping and supply chain management and business strategy and all these things. But the most important thing, the most important asset you have is the people on the job and the culture of the workplace. And you get zero training at an MBA level, often on workplace culture. And I'm sure some schools do it, but most of them are way more focused on business strategy and supply chain management and economic fundamentals, as opposed to the most important asset that we as managers and leaders and business owners have, and that's the people that we work with. Henry Ford, he famously said, you can take all my factories away, you can burn them all down, you can take even my inventions, my intellectual property away from me, but give me my people back and I will rebuild every time. And Henry Ford, and of course, they've had their ups and downs too, but they've been a very resilient company in the United States for over 100 years, because I think actually he understood that the most important asset he had was not the factories and the money and even the intellectual property, but it was the people. I'll tell you what, the people are the most important thing. And, if you are a typical business owner, you don't get a lot of training on how to work with people if you're a typical business manager. So as we talk about the toxic workplace, I don't want us all to be like hating on our boss or hating on our management or hating on the system, because I think a lot of managers and leaders are actually products of the system. That means they didn't design the system. It's not like they sat down and thought, how can I design a system that sucks people's soul, and zombies away their mind? Of course not. They just kind of got stuck in it. And so I think step we have to do is we got to understand it. So let's talk about what is a toxic workplace. And the first thing about a toxic workplace that I want to give you is where you feel like you're not being seen. This is really important. A toxic workplace is an environment where you and I, as contributors to that workplace, that we're part of that team, we don't feel like we're seen. Did you know that only 1 in 3 workers in the United States say that they've received recognition from their work within the past 7 days? And I want you to just imagine the impact of that, because most people, they're not just working for a paycheck. Of course, that's kind of the starting point because we got to pay our bills. But most people are actually working really hard because they crave recognition. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be seen. And here's what's interesting. Employees who don't feel recognized are twice as likely to go look for another job as employees who do. And so listen, if you're on the management side of things, or even on the leadership side of things, the very easiest thing you can do for people to prevent a toxic workplace is just make sure that you appreciate people, that you see them. And it literally costs you nothing to do that. You don't have to build an in-office gym. You don't have to be like Google and have massage therapists on site and laundry facilities, though that is not a bad idea if you can afford it. You just need to see people. You just need to acknowledge the hard work that they do. I'll tell you what, they did some research and they found that 70% of employees, that is a big majority, would increase their work effort if they were acknowledged more. And so I want you to picture Joe, and Joe's in cubicle 1, and I want you to picture Sally, and she's in cubicle 2. And let's imagine that Joe and Sally have roughly the same amount of talent, the same IQ, and they kind of come from similar schools. They have similar, sort of resumes. Okay, so let's just imagine. I know this is a bit fictional, but let's just imagine. You got Joe and Sally. But let's just say that Joe in cubicle 1 always has a great rapport with the boss, and the boss always comes along and says, "Man, Joe, you're doing great. Thanks so much for all the stuff that you're doing." And let's just say the boss completely ignores Sally, even though Sally is just as good as Joe, even though Sally has the same resume as Joe. Now, you could sit there and you could say, well, that's discrimination, and probably it is. Might even be sexism. I mean, who knows? Joe's a dude, Sally's not. And so that's bad. But what if, just from a business perspective, I looked at that as the leader and I said, hey, if I acknowledge Joe, but I don't acknowledge Sally, I'm going to piss off Sally in order to pump up Joe. And yet it literally cost me nothing to acknowledge both of these people. And so why would I want to pump up Joe's tires just to get a bit more effort out of him when I can also pump up Sally's tires and get a bit more effort out of her? Because work output has a lot to do with effort. You know this. I mean, hey, there's days you show up and you kind of half-ass it. And then there's other days you show up and you are full on. And you know as well as I do, in those full on days, you crush it. Why? Because you've got the talent, you got the energy, you got the vibe, you got the focus. But on those days where you just kind of mail it in, I'll tell you what, you barely survive the day. And the thing that makes the difference is not the pay package. It's not, oh, did you buy me a Tesla, as an employment benefit? Though again, if you can afford it, that's nice too. But did you see people? So that's the first thing that causes a toxic workplace, is people not feeling seen. Interestingly, the second thing that causes a toxic workplace is people not feeling heard. I want you to think about this for a moment, right? I need to see people if I want to create a healthy work environment, but I also need to hear people. Now, here's what's crazy. There's a statistic that says that 1 in 4 employees actually dread going to work. Now, actually, that is scary because that's like 25%. So imagine you have a team and there's only like 4 of you. If 1 out of 4 people dread going to work, that is going to have a major drag on your productivity and profit. But here's the other thing about those 1 in 4. They don't feel safe voicing their opinions. So when they dread going to work, is it because they're lazy or lacking talent? I think probably not. Yes, there are some lazy people and people who lack a little bit of talent. Okay, but that is a very, 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 it's like infinitesimally small, like less than 1%. I think that people who feel heard and who feel like they can voice their opinions are excited to go to work. Why? Because now I can make a contribution that actually matters. Even in your marriage, even in your relationships with your closest friends. If every time you open your mouth, your spouse shuts you down, every time your bestie doesn't want to listen to what you have got to say, well, of course, you're just not going to want to be around them for long. Why? Because we all want to feel what? Heard. Now, another poll, and I apologize for all of these statistics, but I hope it really helps you. They actually discovered that 64% of professional workers, so accountants and lawyers and people who in that professional class, they said that the 64% that leaders making decisions without input was their biggest problem. So leaders just out there, I'm steering the ship, you know what I mean? I'm blindfolded and I've got my earmuffs on and I'm not listening to literally anything anybody else has said, but I'm in control. And they actually find that professional workers say that's the biggest problem. Now, why am I saying all this? Because if you do not listen to people, you will shut down their engagement. You will shut down their ideas and you will cause them to feel like you have created a toxic and repressive environment. And I'll tell you, the easiest thing you can do as a leader is listen to people. I mean, I actually think that as a leader, that's your job. And it's funny because as a leader, sometimes I've discovered my ego gets in the way. Maybe that's never happened to you, but it's happened to me a couple of times. And what I mean by that, to be really specific, is that somebody's got some idea that is going to improve our business. And it's somebody I hired. It's somebody I trained. It's somebody that I elevated. It's somebody that I've given raises and promotions to. And so because I have all this track record of, doing all of this for them, I think maybe they don't have any value to offer. But what if they took all the training that I gave them and now they actually have a brain of their own, in a sense, and now they want to continue to give input into the environment so that together we can make it better. I mean, if that's happening for you as a leader, then you've done your job. That's exactly what leaders should do. As a leader, this table, this microphone that we own is an asset. But literally every second I own this microphone, it goes down in value. There's actually something called depreciation tables, where accountants say any hard physical asset will typically go down in value over time. But that person that you hired, and sure, maybe she was the front desk dude, or maybe she was the hostess girl, or whatever she was. But now, because you've invested in her, she is able to run the company. And now that same woman wants to come and give you feedback about what you and the company can do better. But if your ego gets in the way, then you won't actually listen to what she has to say. And the problem is for her, you're creating a toxic work environment because she doesn't feel heard. But for you, you're frankly creating a dumb work environment because you don't want to listen to the people who can help drive your business the most. And so one of the things that I think every leader has to do, and there's a great book, it's called Leaders Eat Last, is if you're a leader, great piece of advice is check your ego at the door. Psychologist Carl Rogers, he said that active listening is a difficult discipline. It requires intense concentration and attention to everything the person is conveying, both verbally and non-verbally. And it's interesting because when I start to understand as a leader that when I don't see people, I don't recognize them, when I don't hear people, I'm creating a toxic environment for them. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start seeing and hearing them a bit more. But there's two more things that lead to a toxic workplace. And I hope you kind of stick with me for this because I know there's leaders on this episode here today. You really need to hear this. And, to some degree, so do I. And so here's the third thing that leads to a toxic workplace, and that is not feeling understood. So when I don't feel seen, when I don't feel heard, when I don't feel understood, that to me appears to be a toxic work environment. Now, when I don't feel understood, what's really going on is a lack of empathy. It's like I'm coming to work and I need to know that my boss and my teammates understand my situation. Now, if there's anything that COVID sort of taught us about the job, and that's why some people are still in remote work and all of that. And all of that is fine. Every workplace has to figure out their own policies, what's going to work for them. But I'll tell you what, COVID taught us as employers, or it should have. If you didn't get this lesson, then you missed something, that everyone's situation is so different. And when you understand that, what ends up happening as a boss, and yes, this will cost you to some degree. It will cost you adaptation. It will cost you time. It will cost you effort. In the end, I don't think it's going to cost you money, but it will cost something along the way. If I want to understand the situation of my team, then I need to often adapt the approach that I'm looking for from them, appreciating that everyone's got their own set of circumstances that we have to deal with. Now, if you go into a workplace and you feel like, man, they just don't understand me, they don't get me, then, actually they've studied this and they've found that it leads to worse mental health, and it actually leads to worse physical health. Just the feeling of not being understood. Now, I don't understand the science and all the dynamics behind that. I do know that when people don't feel safe, when they don't feel cared for, what ends up happening is they're like triggering their amygdala all the time, and they're in this amygdala hijack, and that's releasing all this cortisol and all this adrenaline, which is great in short bursts, but really bad for you in long, sustained bursts, right? And so, of course, that will impact your physical health. And something about empathy that really spoke to me is I saw this Swedish proverb a little while ago, and it said something like this, that shared joy is a double joy, but shared sorrow is half a sorrow. I'm going to say that again. If you have shared joy, right, what that actually means, like if somebody, your best friend comes and says, oh, I'm so happy I got the job, I got the raise, I got the promotion, whatever. And you're like, oh, that's so awesome. And both of you are like, celebrating this massive victory, then that's like a double joy. Everybody benefits. But sorrow works the opposite. In other words, if I share my sorrow with you and you get it and you understand me, all of a sudden the sorrow doesn't feel nearly as bad. It's half a sorrow. Now, sorrow that's not shared is almost double the sorrow, right? It's like, oh man, not only am I suffering here, but I've got to suffer alone. And so listen, as an employer, I've had literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of employees over the years. I understand that I can't get up involved in people's personal lives. I don't even want to. I'm having a hard enough time trying to figure out my own personal life. But when that employee opens up a little bit and they share, hey man, here's my situation. Can you help? Can you adjust? Can you adapt? I have two choices. I can take the empathy approach, or I can take the exclusion approach. And let's just say the exclusion approach is never good. And so if I want to contribute to their mental and their physical health, then what I need to do is take time to be empathetic. Now, that doesn't mean that you give away the storehouse, or you just give them everything that they want, But what it does mean is that you're open to conversations, because when they feel understood, the toxicity of that workplace is going to go down. So toxic workplace, I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. I don't feel understood. And here's the last thing, is a lack of clarity. I don't feel clear. So when I don't feel seen, when I don't feel heard, when I don't feel understood, that leads to a toxic workplace. But the last thing is when I'm not clear. What is expected of me? What am I supposed to do when the standards and the metrics and the responsibilities and the tasks are changing every second? That is really hard on people. Now, this is tough because in a massive corporation, or if you're working for government or whatever, and there's this huge bureaucracy, well, typically everything is predictable. If you're in a startup environment, or if you're entrepreneurial, then it's a lot more dynamic. And so today I might ask Sally to make a sales call and, close a deal. And then tomorrow I might ask Sally to spend all day, making social media posts. And then the day after that, I might ask Sally to do the bookkeeping. And so, what you have to appreciate is that not every environment is the same. When you're a massive bureaucracy, you can sort of say, okay, you're going to only do this all the time. You're going to carve that out like a factory worker or something. But when you are in a dynamic environment, you have to appreciate the fact that there is going to be lots of change. But here's the thing. I really believe that even if there is massive change all around, I think that the effective leaders make sure that they are as clear and transparent as they possibly can be almost every single day. And I know that for a lot of leaders, we just get so busy that we neglect to communicate often our expectations, and sometimes even to people what it is we want them to do. And so they're left feeling, oh man, what am I supposed to do? And because of course, everybody wants to kind of be a part of the team, and they want to be a positive contributor to some degree. They even want to make you as the boss happy, what ends up happening is they feel unclear. And then you get frustrated because you're like, why aren't they doing what I want them to do? But you didn't really tell them. Abe Brown, she said, actually quite famously, she said that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So I think this whole thing about clarity is not just, okay, I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. Sure, that's like the starting point. But I also think it's when I have to give you feedback. And sometimes that feedback might be negative. Sometimes I might have to say, look, I need you to stop doing this, or I need you to start doing that. But that, according to Abe Brown, is more kind, clarity, than you just walking around being vague all the time. Vague is very hard on people. And what they end up experiencing is a toxic workplace. Now, listen, a toxic workplace is when people don't feel seen. The solution to that is acknowledgement and recognition. Number two, a toxic workplace is when people don't feel heard. And so the solution to that, very simply, is listening. A toxic workplace, number three, and this one is really important, is where people don't feel understood. The solution to that is empathy. And then, of course, a toxic workplace, as we just described, is a place where people don't feel clear. And the answer to that, my friends, is clarity. Just be clear. Now, toxic workplaces are absolutely no fun at all. Let me promise you, our organization, we're literally called Flourishing Workplace. And you can find us flourishingworkplace.com. We can help. I'll tell you what, we believe at Flourishing Workplace in workplaces where everyone can thrive, everyone can belong, and everyone can contribute. We don't just care about your business. We care about you as people. And so I would encourage you to go to our website right now, flourishingworkplace.com, and you can book a no-cost discovery session right away where we will sit down with you. And in that discovery session, we will provide for you a detailed roadmap to move from a toxic workplace potentially, or even a workplace where people are hurting and struggling and maybe even confused, to a flourishing workplace. And not only will we provide you with that roadmap, but we will walk with you to help build it. So again, go to flourishingworkplace.com and please do tune into our next episode where we're going to continue talking about creating healthy workplace culture. Thank you so much.